Mary Mapes was a producer at 60 Minutes, which was sort of the gold standard of television investigative journalism. And she produced a lot of stories with Dan Rather, who's sort of in the line of Walter Cronkite. And they did an amazing piece on Abu Ghraib, and then they broke a story in the lead up to the 2004 Bush-Kerry election about the fact that George Bush had shirked his service in the Texas Air National Guard and gone AWOL, which is quite a contentious story. It had the backing of CBS, and then the story was scrutinised as not being entirely accurate, and they subsequently lost their jobs.
Mike Smith is a researcher for Mary Mapes, and he's all the way on one end of the spectrum, kind of represents how a younger generation feels about where news is going.
When I read Mary Mapes' book that the film is based on, I was just sort of really sucked into the excitement of how these stories get put together, how tracking down the leads. It's almost like a detective story in a way. And then there's the added interesting stuff of how this story sort of exploded and ended up changing media forever in a way, because it was sort of the rise of the internet and the rise of sort of digital journalism overtaking mainstream media.
When you tell a story that's slightly back in time, as this happened in 2004, you have to ask yourself what's the relevance. And I think there's a lot of undigested stuff that we haven't really processed, how we get our information, how we digest our news, because the landscape has changed entirely since 2004 when this was set. This is 3 years before the Twitter sphere, and the whole kind of invisible commentary that blogs represent, all that was just beginning to take off. And I think it's very difficult now to distinguish between fact and fiction. And I think the film asks a lot of quite interesting, provocative questions about our news media.
I hope, first and foremost, just as a filmmaker, you want to make a movie that moves people and involves them and engages them and transports them. And so I just want to make sure that it's a story that really takes you on an emotional journey. And after that, if in addition to that, people walk out and think a little bit about where we are as a society and journalism is right now, that would just be icing on the cake.